it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, it's Ivy Slater, and welcome to this episode of Her Success Story. Thank you for joining me here. Today, we have another business coach, and it's always great when two business coaches come together because the conversation, the information, and the insight is always lively. Keren Eldad is a trusted advisor to industry-leading executives and superstar entrepreneurs who are setting records at the top of their field. Since 2016, these powerhouses have sought Keren out to help themselves make significant breakthroughs in profitable growth of their businesses while revitalizing their energy and defining the meaning of their entire lives. So Keren is going to share some insight from her own dividing the meaning of the transformation in her own life. And I think it's great that she is joining us here today, end of summer, and we're looking at transformation. Keren, thank you for joining me.
Ivy, thank you for having me. It's fun to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, I'm not a big fan, and the new listeners to Her Success Story is I don't give like big, long bios. I want to hear it from our guests. I want to hear your story. I want to hear where you came from and how you evolved. So give us a little bit about your background and yourself.
Sure. First of all, I completely agree. I think that talking about yourself is insane. And we're living in a culture in which we're really always talking about ourselves. So all you're getting with a bio really is a curated synopsis of the sizzle reel. Instead, if you really dig into a person's story, you get things that really are evocative of you, that resonate with you for a reason, that are supposed to connect with you. And my hope is that when people read my bio or check out anything that I put out there, like a talk or a video, they're really seeing themselves, not me. Because the story is kind of universal. And I do coach, just like you, executives primarily. I'm a business coach. But I like to say that my primary goal is to take them from net worth to self-worth. And that doesn't mean that I'm interested in getting rid of their money. I'm, of course, there to help you become more profitable and more viable, not only as a business person, but as a business. But it's much more important to get in touch with who you really are. And to do that, you have to start telling the story like it is. So my story is really the story of discovering business coaching through a long career in corporate, actually in the publishing industry, similarly to you, Ivy, where the industry starts to decline, and it perfectly coincides with the decline of other structures in my life, which eventually, through lots of turmoil, gives birth to a completely new career.
And it's so interesting because, business has evolutions. And, for many, many years, the publishing industry was an incredibly strong industry. You could never have seen that evolve. It's still present, and printing is still present. And for those listeners who don't know, some of my biggest client bases when I was a printer was in publishing, which Keren and I have in common. And as we met and have gotten to know each other over time, that's what was the thing, like, oh my goodness, how did we not know each other before this?
Totally. Because it was a teeny tiny little industry, but a very, very mighty one indeed. I mean, I remember in 2007, I had just gotten to New York. I was offered a job at Vogue, and I thought, that's it. I can die now. It does not get better. It doesn't get bigger. And I think that, look at this. It's 10 years later, it's 12 years later. And what is Vogue anymore but a small pamphlet? It's truly a sign of the times. But you're right. We didn't see it coming. What's really awesome about it is this is really just the beginning of the big global transformation, the big impact of not only global markets and the internet, but of AI and of automation on our lives. So we transitioned first. You transitioned before it was even a thing. And I
started transitioning in 2007 when you came to New York.
Which truly talk about foresight. But today, and let's talk about it. My big pivot in my career was just a couple of years ago as I was turning 40. And I think that for so many people out there, this is not only a something to think about. It's truly here to stay. So the story of your bio and your transformation is really what's powerful for other people to hear, isn't it?
It's so important. So you came to New York in '07, you got your job at Vogue, you started building this, young, ambitious woman in New York City, and landing Vogue as your first job in publishing, for those people who don't know, is an amazing, amazing feat.
It's true, except I didn't get that job. This is a very good story.
Tell us.
So I got the job offer from Tom Florio, who was then the publisher of Vogue. And I was so happy. I danced in the street. I actually remember physically dancing in the street. The next day, the nice people of Condé Nast called me and said that because I was not a citizen of the United States and they did not hire foreign nationals, they rescinded the offer.
Ouch.
It was the toughest moment of my life until a few months later. A few months later, I landed the same job at Cosmopolitan. Not too bad, at the time, the biggest magazine in the world.
Yes.
And fascinatingly, incredibly, like the universe was speaking, the entire management team at Vogue got fired. Tom Florio, his entire deputy team, they were all outed from Condé Nast for many, many reasons. It was probably the beginning of the publishing industry's seismic shift. And I realized that I actually wasn't rejected. I was spared. And this becomes a big, big life lesson for me. And I did stay in the industry for 10 more years, pretty much, almost. And I went in-house I was always a luxury specialist. I ended up becoming the marketing director, the head of consumer marketing at IWC, which is a very big Richemont brand, a big watch company, which is funny because today I coach their team. And that's it. I already started to maneuver the career a little bit more to the marketing side than to the sales side because I could see what was happening. But inevitably, the transformation had to be much, much bigger than that. Ivy, at the beginning, I sort of started to sideline, basically creating my own marketing agency or my own advisory to start helping publishing companies. But after a while, I started asking bigger questions than that. And as we all do, I ended up with different answers and a different vocation.
So you went on to global luxury goods brand. And what happened next for you? I know there was, as we were talking earlier, and it's not that unusual, that when the universe, you feel like there's collisions and there's multifaceted things that happen simultaneously. And I have shared a little bit, and those listeners who have not heard that, listen to some older episodes, and I'll revisit this again in the future. But when our personal lives and our business lives and everything, there's I don't even want to say a big shift, but a massive shift all at once.
Yeah, I completely agree. Can I say a bad word?
Yeah.
On your show. I like to say, pray for a shitstorm. And the reason I say
that's not so bad. For a woman who was in a printing plant for 20 plus years, a shitstorm isn't so bad.
Okay, I'm glad that I didn't offend anybody's sensibilities, hopefully out there, but I always say pray for a shitstorm because it's a phenomenal way of describing how everything conflates together. And the reason is we weren't aware of it, but you and I were probably in industries that were dying. And as the industries are dying, we can start to feel the suffocation that comes with an industry that's dying. As a result of that, whether you're actively pursuing something else or not, your insides are calling out for something different. And the universe is hearing you whether you like it or not. And it's going to send you the best way out, even if it's not a comfortable way out. It will send you a way out. And so the story of my transformation begins like this. In 2012, I'm at the top of my game. I'm at the top of my field. I'm not even in my mid-30s yet, Ivy. And at the time, I was married to a tall man. Everybody knows that that's a goal in life, right? Married to tall guy. I was at the top of my field. I'm basically a C-level executive. I'm making multiple six figures. I'm thin. I'm winning awards. I'm doing all of the things that you're supposed to do after marrying the person you're supposed to marry and having the education you're supposed to have.
Check, check, and check. Everything's in alignment and everything's going fabulously well, because that's how everybody's life is supposed to look on the
So
outside.
true. So true. And I remember at this time posting a picture, not on Instagram because I wasn't that cool yet, but on Facebook, of me and my ex-husband. And he was wearing a pink tie and I was wearing a pink dress. And everybody just congratulated us on what a beautiful and happy and amazing couple we were. And that I had a dream life. And in that moment, I realized something so profoundly. And I wanted to say it, but I didn't, of course, because I had to keep faith. And it was nowhere near a dream life. It was a giant sham. Everything was a sham. Not that I was not who I pretended to be, but that I was living a life that was entirely composed of none of my preferences. I didn't like that guy, let alone love him. He was massively abusive. I was in a terrible relationship. And I had entered it, I guess, because I really, really needed to get married before I became one of the Sex and the City ladies. I remember having that in my head as a giant fear. I was living in Switzerland, which is where he was from, because he insisted on living in Switzerland and because he convinced me that New York is really for sad people. Turns out it's not. I live in New York to this day, and I love it. Thank you very much. Switzerland was certainly not for me. And so I'm living in this beautiful big house, but I hate it because I can't stand the city. I can't stand the typology. I can't stand my relationship. And even though the job was good, and I always appreciated the luxury industry and the publishing industry and my capacity to do marketing, I always had this nagging feeling that I could do more than this, that there was something else that I might be able to express myself better through.
So what was going on is that feeling is, this has to be temporary because there has to be more.
Of course, there has to be more.
Living it full out, and we don't consciously know this is a stage, but we know subconsciously that there's more for us and that this is not who we're truly destined to be.
I agree, but I want to emphasize the word you just used, subconsciously, because it was a nagging feeling. But you know what I felt externally? I felt guilt for wanting more. Who could possibly ask for more than this? I felt guilt for wanting to jump ship from a relationship. I got married. I decided that somewhere I thought that I was just supposed to stick this out, like so many other couples have stuck this out. So what if he's terribly mean to me and constantly tells me to lose weight? That's fine. And so I dragged on. Luckily, I managed to drag on for very long until one day something big happened in the relationship. And I remember just looking at him blankly because I'd been processing this for a month and saying, yeah, by the way, I want a divorce and we're done. And I started to just immediately make plans to go home. I had no idea what I was coming back to. I had no idea what I was going to do next. I also did not wish for a job, which is funny because when you live for appearances, you also spend a lot of money. So I was kind of broke, not totally broke, but kind of broke. And so I'm moving back to New York with, I don't know, $15 and 2 cats. And I decided that I was starting my own company. And at first I was just going to do business advisory so that I could buy time and just see what I wanted rather than commit to something and just lock myself into something again.
And so I want to jump in here for a second because it's so common that businesses are built out of transition. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I'm good at this. And you know what? I'm providing for myself well. And guess what? I'm actually really happy.
It was truly amazing. First of all, I was astounded that people were paying me consulting fees. I'm not going to lie. Even though I'd been used to great salaries, I didn't think that people were just going to sign retainers with me. And they did. And I learned a lot about setting up basic business structures at that time. But there's something else that happened during that period that really changed my life. And that was that I reached out for the first time in my life to what I had deemed unacceptable from my academic snobbery. And that was self-help, personal development. Tony Robbins, I thought was for sad people. Turns out, actually pretty interesting guy. And from one to the next, I really started hiring coaches one after the other, became one of those coaching junkies who's constantly at a Abraham Hicks seminar. And until one day I realized that there are 300 books in my room and that this is something that I do all the time. And I might as well accept the fact that I may be a little bit more inclined towards it than just as a pastime. And that's when I really decided to just go for it and create my own coaching program.
So first of all, in the journey, let's date that a little bit. So when did that aha moment of, wow, the personal development stuff isn't for the sad people, it's actually for really smart,
Mm-hmm.
people who believe in education, believe in continuous learning, and want to continuously develop themselves?
The first time I picked up a self-help book was 2012 as I was going through a divorce. It was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R.
Stephen
Covey,
Covey.
which is a masterpiece, and everybody should read it. It transformed the way my divorce went. From a contentious divorce, we actually managed to have a relatively okay divorce in which I constantly acknowledged that he wasn't a mean ogre. He was really hurt and dealing with failure. And from his vantage point, that was extremely difficult to deal with. And when I could relate to him that way, we figured out a way to just walk out of this without killing anybody and relatively intact and relatively quickly.
Well,
Then I left it.
congratulations on that.
Thank you. That's a big deal. Yeah.
That's a big stinking deal.
It
Really
was a huge
is.
deal. It was a huge deal. But as I started the business consulting firm, which is called Digilux and is still my holding company, I started to just read. I reached for books, and between 2013, 2015, I estimate that I read at least 200 books. I also started to go to big seminars like Date with Destiny, the Tony Robbins
Yeah.
coaching program, and also Jen Sincero, who wrote You're a Badass's coaching program,
Yes.
and Gina DeVee. I mean, you name the online program, I bought it. And
I love, there's great content out there. There is amazingly great content out there.
Phenomenal. Until one day you decide to take it very seriously. And I remember the first time I plunked down $7,500 for a coach. Today, my coaches are more expensive. This is the nature of coaching, right? But it was incredibly painful, but I just knew that this woman had what it took to help me, and she did. And that was it. That was the day that I said, I can do this. I can do this better. And I can do this for people who are like me, who are kind of super intense, who are already on the other side of the spectrum. It's not really people who are looking for first-time help. And that's it. That's how With Enthusiasm was born in 2016, just a year later.
Absolutely amazing. So you've been in business for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your things that have surprised you today?
Well, the executive coaching turn was a surprise. I essentially wanted to just be a personal coach and to be as ubiquitous and as popular as, say, a Marie Forleo.
Right.
But as I got more interested in this, some things started to happen. My cats died. And as I was going through, I had 2 cats and I don't have any children. So to just set the scene for you, 15-year-old cats dying is a very big deal.
That's a big deal.
And I had to go away and just think for a while. And when I was doing this, I was already a certified coach. But the first thing I did wasn't reach into this. I became a volunteer with Crisis Text Line. And I'm still a suicide counselor to this day. And I'm on their advisory board. And I started to take the work extremely seriously. And when I started to take the work very seriously, I became more and more accredited and more honed in on the particular strata of society that I'm serving. And this really resonated extremely well with other C-level professionals who were basically a former version of me, who kind of manifested everything through that competitive energy and figured out that this cannot possibly be everything because they were miserable.
Yeah. So what tips do you have for women out there that are going through things saying, gee, this doesn't feel right any longer, or what would it look like if? So when that subconscious mind or that gut feeling is niggling and we're like, what do I do? Where do I go? What is this about? Maybe, but maybe not. And I'm safe and I'm, any tips or thoughts you have for women like that?
With immense pleasure. I think the first thing is drop the perfectionism. Drop the perfectionism.
Hold on, repeat that. Drop the perfectionism.
Drop the perfectionism.
What does that look like?
Well, perfectionism is a facade. Liz Gilbert has lovingly called it an haute couture way of declaring your insecurity, essentially. And I believe that it's actually just you conceding to a bully inside your head. Perfectionism is never good, and it's a terrifying fear of making a mistake, being found out, not being loved, being judged in some negative way. And for many people, the reason they don't listen to those niggling thoughts and to anxiety that is manifest every day, you're waking up and you're just not happy. That's easy to detect, but most people just leave it and chug along because of the illusion of perfectionism. I must maintain this facade. And I'm here to say, take off the mask, be completely okay with mistakes, start speaking more openly about messing up, and start speaking really nicely about yourself and to yourself. And when you start that practice, you will very, very quickly not be able to tolerate anything that doesn't match it. If you're in a difficult relationship that you think is kind of okay, but it's not that happy, you'll see when you start saying to yourself, I deserve to be happy and it's totally okay and I'm doing my best around here and it's fine for me that I look like this and that I feel like this, you're not going to be able to take it when the circumstances around you don't match. And that's probably the first and most fundamental thing. And the second is when you have risen out of that perfectionism and into vulnerability, the big Brene Brown buzzword, which is really just showing your wisdom rather than thinking of concealing your weaknesses, you can start to make some moves. And when you make some moves, I actually don't mean don't take action, start companies, quit your job, leave your relationship. I mean, do the emotional work. And the most important thing you can do as a second step is either hire a specialized trained coach or read. You're right, Ivy. There is a ton of amazing content out there. And if any voice is resonating with you, believe me, there is much more than meets the eye, and you will find it. And they will, and you'll follow the next thing and the next thing and the next thing until one day you have a glorious new version of you.
So I think one of the most important things that I'm hearing you say is never accept not being 100% happy, thrilled in the life we're leading. And if you're feeling, and we've all gone through dips and turns, and it doesn't mean we're divorcing, ending careers, or doing anything, but take those moments and do the work. Do the work because we all deserve to be at 100% happiness.
It's true.
And
it's
live
funny though,
the
don't you find? No, you're absolutely right. I love that that's what you extracted from this so neatly and so succinctly, because it's the definition of enlightenment. The definition of enlightenment is astonishment. It's super happiness. It's extraordinary happiness. And one of the big gripes that I have is that so many people come up to me and say, nah, that's not realistic. Actually it is. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be bouncing off the walls enthusiastic all the time. That, I think, is the definition of lunacy. However, you are
agreed there.
I think you're going to be satisfied with what is all the time. I think you're going to end up in a place where you thank God for the problems that come and you thank God for the glory that comes. It's just the way you start to move. And everybody does deserve to feel that way. And it is 100% a possibility. And once we start, when we stop selling ourselves short from the belief systems that we picked up as kids, like, life is about compromise and life is hard and nothing worth having comes easy, you start seeing that for some people things do come easily or more easily, and that for some people life is rather joyous, and it can be for you too. So why are you settling?
I love it. So Keren, how can people learn more about you and be in touch and stay in tune?
Of course, through podcasts like these where you're doing incredibly important work. I, by the way, am obsessed with the Women on Boards platform. And I think it's extremely important to empower women in general to go for it. And just, I think we should lambast our way into those boards and onto C-level positions. But also on KerenEldad.com, which is my website. And follow me at Coach Keren on Instagram.
Fabulous. Thank you for joining me here today, listeners. Remember to hit the subscribe button so her success story shows up in your inbox, so to speak, every Monday morning. New content, new people, great connections, and so fortunate, in fact, and grateful for them. Please leave a review. Let us know what you think, what else you want to hear. We're here to serve and be of service. Hope you enjoyed today's interview. I got to tell you, I did. See you next time on Her Success Story.
To shine.